Two Turtle Doves, performed by Ursula Harmon.
Snow had fallen in a muted hush since the small hours, softening the village's contours until Marrowbone appeared blurred, half forgotten, as though drawn in charcoal and left out in the wet. The roof stooped under the accumulating weight, their chimneys exhausted from the long night of burning whatever wood could be spared. Even the gallows tree, only yesterday bloated with its wicker fruit, seemed diminished now, more skeleton than sentinel. Mara Venn stepped into the square without hurry, her boots sinking to the ankles. She always felt lighter on the morning of the second day, though she never admitted it. The memories were too precise, too ready to unfold. A single misstep, a flash of birds' wings at the periphery, a certain shape pressed into snow, the bare wrists of someone washing linen at the pump, and it all unspooled. Two figures were already waiting at the edge of the communal pit, the place the villagers called the nest, though it resembled no cradle nature had ever devised. A shallow bowl in the earth, ringed with black stones older than any barn or hearth in Marrowbone, the nest exuded a hush that even the winds honored. It had no scent, no warmth, no life at all. Yet the soil never froze. The chosen children stood with their hands stiffly clasped in front of them, as if doing so could somehow preserve their innocence a few minutes longer. Liza Barron and Tomas Pell, neither yet 16, bundled in patched coats and scarves that had outlived generations. Their faces were stiff with a thinly held composure, an expression Mara recognized with a midwife's certainty. The same brittle courage she'd seen on women walking steadily into labor, aware of the tearing to come and resigned to it. She paused several paces behind them, clasping her gloved hands behind her back. The cold gnawed the creases of her fingers, but she welcomed the distraction. It kept the whispering at bay. It had begun again last night, thin sounds threading the stillness beneath her floorboards. Not voices exactly, more like pressure rearranging itself into mockery of breath. She'd once tried describing it to someone years ago, and failed. How could she explain the sense of a mouth forming beneath the foundation stones, not to speak, but merely to exist?
"We're ready when you are,"
murmured old Farron the blacksmith, dragging Mara from her drifting thoughts. His eyes were red from the cold and something else, something like apology. Behind him, two wicker cages rested in the snow, their occupants shifting inside with jittery, skeletal urgency. The turtle doves had been starved for a day and a half. Their feathers had taken on a chafed, brittle look. Their eyes appeared larger now, glossy and senseless, blackening with a kind of devout hunger. Mara nodded once and stepped toward the children. "Hold out your wrists." They obeyed, already shaking. She drew from her coat a folded length of cloth, pale, coarse, faintly frayed at the edges. The villagers wove these strips each year from the discarded garments of the previous doves. A strange heirloom, if anyone cared to call it that. History reconstituted it into a single fragile tether. She wound the fabric around Liza's right wrist and Tomas's left, binding them together palm to palm. The knot pulled so tight that both winced. She let their clasped hands fall between them like the hinge of a door. "You look at each other," Mara instructed quietly. No matter what happens, your eyes stay locked. You give him... She tilted her chin toward the earth. No purchase. Tomas swallowed hard. What if one of us... You won't. Her tone, meant to be assuring, came out clinical. Too practiced. She saw the flicker of fear ripple through Liza, but it was too late to soften it. The cold was deepening. Hesitation could not be afforded. The villagers began the soft chant, barely more than breath, syllables shaped like the cracking of distant branches. It wasn't a prayer, but a reminder, a statement of presence beneath a sky that had grown darker since yesterday's ritual. The sun moved behind a sheet of cloud that seemed bruised from within. The children were guided to their knees at the edge of the nest. The shallow earthen bowl waited, its soil black and loose, shifting faintly as if stirred by unseen roots, or perhaps by the breath Mara heard at night, pushing its way upward in slow increments. Old Farron lifted the first cage. The birds erupted inside it, beating, scraping, a flutter of desperate bodies. When he upended the cage into the pit, the doves tumbled out in an explosion of wings and bony weight. They recovered instantly, spinning toward the children with a baleful, single-minded fury. Liza tensed. Tomas whispered something only she could hear. Their foreheads nearly touched. The first dove landed at Tomas's shoulder and drove its beak hard into the juncture of neck and collarbone. Tomas jerked backward with a strangled breath, eyelids fluttering, but made no sound. Blood welled at the corner of the wound, bright against the woolen collar. The second dove skittered up Liza's coat, clawing at her wrist, tearing at the binding cloth as if demanding entry into her bones. She whimpered. Not aloud, but through a tremor that rippled through her entire frame. Mara felt the memory return, the heat of her own blood running down her elbows, the frantic rhythm of the birds inside the cage. Her sister, across from her, bound wrist to wrist, biting down on her tongue so hard she'd nearly bitten it off. The world contracting to a pulse in her throat as the ground began to hum. Today, it began sooner. She knelt closer, watching the children struggle with a professional focus bordering on cruelty. Thomas's lower lip was trembling. Liza's face was crumpling, but her gaze never left his. Their shared focus was the only barrier between sanity and the vast attention stirring below the soil. The bird's assault grew frenzied, scratching, tearing, plucking arcs of hair and ribbon, the air filled with the frantic percussion of wings, each beat a sharpened note in the ritual's grotesque melody. Then, at the precise midpoint, when the sun was a faint smear, when the cold seemed to distill itself into glass, the birds went still. Not fatigued, not sated. Still. Both doves turned their heads toward the earth beneath the children's knees, beaks parted, as though scenting something that humans could not detect. Liza sucked in a breath, a soft, involuntary gasp that might as well have been a scream. Tomas squeezed her hand so tightly the knuckles whitened. A tremor passed through the soil, thin, delicate, like the flutter of something colossal shifting in its sleep deep below roots and stone. Mara's stomach hollowed out. She felt the faint, unmistakable suction of attention, of something ancient and patient and capable of endless hunger, gathering beneath the ground. The dove's body stiffened, wings flared aloft, feathers raised in a crown-like halo. Their eyes rolled wide. Mara whispered, "Hold." The children leaned into one another, bound hands clenched, foreheads pressed so close their breaths mingled. Tears slipped down Liza's cheeks, freezing almost instantly. Tomas's entire body shook from pain and terror. The tremor passed. The soil calmed. The air exhaled with them. Then, as abruptly as they'd frozen, the doves collapsed, spent, panting, feathers scattered like discarded petals across the nest. Mara seized them immediately, returning them to the cages. The ritual was complete. Liza sagged against Tomas, and Tomas folded around her, the two of them still bound, blood dripping from their wounds. They had endured. They had held each other. They had preserved the boundary for one more day. But the children were not the only ones trembling. Mara's gaze lifted to the sky on an impulse she could not deny. The patch of clouds above the square was thinning in a strange, uneven way, as though something behind them was eroding the light. A small, round imperfection appeared at their center. A dark spot within the gray. Not quite a star. Not quite a shadow. A bruise in the firmament. It pulsed faintly. She closed her eyes and for an instant felt warm breath across her ear. Impossible. Enormous. Patient. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow will ask for more. When she opened her eyes again, the bruised star was gone. But the sky had learned how to darken.